Welcome to week 6 of the absolutely epic early week podcast. I am your host, JM to Win, coming off my worst NFL DFS weekend in my career. Hanging out with a couple of buddies of mine, one of whom had a solid weekend. Bobby Fye, how you doing, man?
Doing great, man. Had a really good weekend. It could have been a lot better. I won on every site, but I just missed a couple of, well, not just missed, but I had an outside chance at a few huge paydays and didn't quite get there.
So we were talking about this a little bit before the show. In the past, I've gotten a lot of flack from other top DFS players for the fact that I apply game theory less than most people in NFL, with my thinking being I'm extremely good at predicting what will happen in games, so I take the best plays. And it's been extremely profitable for me the last couple of years. And for some reason this year, I've gotten a lot more into game theory and worried about ownership. Bobby, tell the people what you were saying before the show in regards to the chalk.
Well, it's interesting because the chalk has been the way to go. And here's my overall thinking about it. I don't want to get way too into it because I know we want to keep the show short and sweet, but I think it's really interesting that the sport that's followed the most, that's bet on the most, is football. It's researched the most. Everything's built into the Vegas lines. There's more expected. Basically, the chalk makes a lot more sense when there's more research done. When there's more put into everything, it's all painted out there for you. And I believe that's another angle that I wasn't saying before, but the truth is that people out there know. They know what's going to happen. You don't have to be blind to see when someone's going to be targeted. Taking the chalk for the most part, you're winning tournaments. Look at the people who are winning these tournaments. They maybe have one guy at less than 10% owned, or occasionally two.
And I think one thing too is obviously you're looking for the great play that's going overlooked. But if there is no great play that's going overlooked, go with what's the good play. I mean, honestly, it makes a lot of sense. So we'll talk about that more as we just kind of talk about the plays we like. But let's bring in our third member here, Grant. We're going to throw it over to you for Grant's rant.
First, I'm going to rant about something that's been on my mind lately. Anyone who says an unhealthy food or healthy food is better than an unhealthy food is crazy. Milk chocolate is not better than dark chocolate. You put butter on everything when you cook it and it tastes better. Waffle crisp is 1,000,000 times better than puffins. And if you dab your pizza with a napkin to get the grease off, you are just wasting everything you just bought. But what you guys are saying, 5 weeks, the chalk, it doesn't always matter. Chalk's not always the way to go. It's a lot of times scenario of the person being at the top is going to be a chalky lineup because they are the ones most likely to do something and they are the ones that are mostly owned. So if they're in most people's lineup, that's just what happens with a GPP. But it's the weeks that chalk doesn't hit, every time you're out of it, you're going to have huge paydays. Chalk this week, and I ended up pulling down at least one GPP. But it's ridiculous to me to think that, this 4-week sample size is right because of the chalk hit. No,
I'd like to jump in on that. For me, it's not. For me, I'm never attempting to side with chalk. I'm attempting to find what I think are the best plays, independent of what other people are saying. So my thing was this last week. Anybody who read my there's the train again. Anybody who read my NFL Edge. Anyone who read my NFL Edge this last week knows that I was really high on T.Y. Hilton. I was really high on Brandon Marshall. There were several other guys that then, and those guys were locked onto my roster early week. And then as the week moved on, I started seeing that, these guys are going to be popular. So I intentionally moved off of them, even thinking they were the best plays. So in my mind, I'm never intending to go with chalk, but if there's a guy that I feel is the best play, I think you still play him. And obviously there are different ways to succeed too. I mean, you look at somebody like, I don't know what's happened to Draft Cheat because he's kind of been pretty chalky with his lineups lately, at least in higher dollar tournaments. But somebody like Draft Cheat traditionally or Jeff El Jefe will just go way off the board with a lot of their plays.
Draft Cheat, by the way, I just want to jump in, and he won all the Thursday tournaments that I was trying to win. I just want to throw that out there. So he's doing something right. Right? With a lot of chalk. I'm not looking
exactly. And like traditionally, though, he's been very non-chalky. And you look at Jeff's lineups, it's a lot of sub 5%, sub 10% owned guys. And there's something to be said for that, too. Those guys make a lot of money as well. But my point is, I was just talking about it before the show personally, and then Bobby had some thoughts, so I felt like it was worth bringing it up. But In the past, I've made a lot of money in NFL by just sticking with what I feel are the best plays and not worrying about the chalk. And I think there's something to be said for that angle too. I don't think that there's one way to win money in DFS. If there were, everyone would be doing it. But there's definitely multiple ways. Also, Grant, I kind of feel like Grant is in Portland, Oregon this weekend, and we watched football together on Sunday. Grant, I kind of feel like the health food thing was directed at me.
No, it's nothing against you. It's nothing against you. I get things, but it's just if you say that it tastes better, you're a crazy person. It may be better for you, but it does not taste better.
So one more note before we move on with the show. Grant lost last week's bold call. It was pretty close. None of us really won, but I had people vote on Twitter. And I think we had about 600 or 700 votes. I can actually check right now. And out of those, 660 votes, 41% said that Grant's call of Brady not a top 8 quarterback was worse than Bobby's call of Aguilar, a top 15 wide receiver. That was 37%. So Grant this week has to tweet about how great the song Fireflies by Owl City is. So look for that. Remember, Grant is not allowed to like any replies or retweets or anything like that. He just has to pretend like it's a perfectly legit tweet, and we will have our week 6 bold calls at the end so we can find out who has to tweet something embarrassing next week. So keep an eye out for that.
I have to say one thing about the Owl City thing. I have a friend who's one of the best poker players in the world, and that's his in between when you have your break song. That's what he goes and listens to. So it's his go-to. So actually, this tweet is like a more legitimate than you think it is. Even though I
love the song.
How can you not? It's like it grows on you. Even it's so bad, but it's like refreshing. It makes you feel good.
I want to dance.
Grant, do you realize that it's so bad, or do you just love it?
Oh, I just love it. But for me, it's right on par with Nickelback in terms of greatness.
Was tonight the first time?
Please don't ever talk about Nickelback. Please don't ever talk about Nickelback. The worst band ever. Sorry.
Grant, have you ever heard the song before tonight?
I have, but I forgot about it. And I'm like, oh, I never knew the word. I never knew the name of this song. I love this song.
Oh God. Okay, so we're gonna jump into week 6, and we're gonna start with trend or trap. We're gonna look at 5 things and talk about whether we think things we can expect to continue moving forward, or if we think that these are outliers, traps that we should avoid. So the first one, Grant, I'm going to start with you because I know you have strong opinions on this one, and that is Carlos Hyde. He is one of the few running backs who gets 20 touches per game. He is perpetually underpriced. He's going to be 5,100 this week, and he's perpetually under-owned. So are you calling Carlos Hyde a trend or a trap in general? And then specifically this week against Buffalo, do you like that matchup for him?
It's absolutely a trend. I don't understand why people have not been on this already. I played him in cash this week on my Thursday tournaments in every single one. I thought he was a better play than David Johnson, and I just cannot believe that anyone's doing this. You look at every single game he's played.
You're wrong about
when
that.
Healthy, done great, and he's have to give it to in the end zone or throw it to in the end zone. There's not really too much there. They're going to run a high-paced offense. It's a Chip Kelly offense, which favors the running back every time. He's getting the majority of the workload. And this week he's playing Buffalo, which we saw what Gurley did this week against him, which he hasn't had a great game. And everyone else was on Gurley. Like, just from a chalk perspective, a lot of people were on Gurley this week against this defense. So it's absolutely a trend. He's going to get 25 points this week. And if you aren't playing him.
Carlos Hyde's touches so far, 25, 17, 22, 16, 28. And this is, on a team that's usually losing or at least not super competitive. He's still going to get the touches. Bobby, what is your take on Carlos Hyde?
In general, as much as I want to say that it's ridiculous to say that he was a better player than David Johnson, I still think that he is definitely a trend. There's no question he's just getting the touches, like Grant said, in a Chip Kelly offense. He's going to get majority of the workload. I actually think he's a very talented back. I think he's a better running back than Ezekiel Elliott. If he happened to play in Dallas and behind that line, he would absolutely destroy the NFL. He's a very, very good player on not a very good team. I don't love the matchup as much this week as most people might, but I do like it. And I love the other side of it. So I think it's funny that we're talking about him just because LaShawn McCoy on the other side of it is probably the best play of the week at running back. And I don't usually love running back plays, but you want to talk about guys who get usage against a team that's going to be playing up tempo. He's playing at home. His touches are through the roof, and his numbers are incredible. He's incredibly consistent, and he hasn't even had a chance for a breakout game. This is going to be it. He's going to put up 35 fantasy points this week.
So before we move on to our next trend or trap, Bobby, we can stick with 35 points for LaShawn McCoy as your bold call.
Okay, that was too bold to say 35, but I think I'll say 30.
I think we're all LaShawn McCoy truthers, especially Grant and I were talking about that on Sunday.
Look at this spot.
How under-owned he always is as well. But, yeah, Carlos Hyde, one thing that's a bit misleading is Buffalo's yards allowed per carry, which is at 3.5 on the season, which is very low. But Buffalo DVOA, which is, matchup adjusted, they rank 14th against the run. So it's a middling matchup. Obviously, they were a bottom 3 or 4 run defense last year. So there's definitely opportunity for Carlos Hyde this week, and he will be under-owned. So I think he's a trend in general because of the touches, and I think he's going to be a solid play this week as well. Just a reminder, too, for listeners, we record this Monday night, and one of the points of this is for us to get our early week thoughts out there. We've talked in the past about how your thoughts early in the week are often your sharpest thoughts before you start overthinking things. So obviously we'll all be digging in a bit more later in the week, and you might hear us say something on Friday or Saturday that's a bit different. Maybe we're wrong by Friday or Saturday, but definitely looking at it just at first glance, Carlos Hyde's going to be a very strong play this week, and agreed on LaShawn McCoy as well. The next one we want to look at is we're going to group 2 guys into the same pool of trend or trap, and that is just in general the Patriots tight ends. Bobby, talk to me about if it's sustainable in this offense, for 2 tight ends to have big games. If we're ready to trust Gronk at this point, if Martellus Bennett's big game was an outlier, what are your thoughts on this situation?
I'm not going to go on the Martellus Bennett train. I'm very impressed by Grant and a number of people who actually pointed out to me before that playing him with Gronk was a great way to go this weekend, and they were absolutely right with Brady. That's interesting. It's a little bit of the Aaron Hernandez thing. They've never really had a talented pass catching guy since then that's as good as Bennett is. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sold on that. I think that the Patriots are going to destroy the NFL, and Tom Brady will destroy the NFL. They are the second best team in football. And they're going to put up as many points as possible and beat up on everybody they're supposed to. They're not going to be in 1-score games and games they shouldn't be. They're going to be blowing people out. They're going to be doing it through the air. Brady's going to be picking any receiver on that team. It's going to be a little bit of a crapshoot unless you can spot certain trends in the defenses they're facing. It's absolutely a trend going forward with the Patriots offense.
And what are your thoughts on Gronk?
Gronk, yeah, I mean, he's my favorite he was my favorite this week. Going forward, like I said, it's going to be a matchup. It's situational because I feel like it could be anybody on that team. Brady's really good at distributing.
So many targets on that team for sure. That's one of the tough things about targeting them.
And you have a quarterback as good as him or Aaron Rodgers, and it's just really hard trying to guess that receiver who's going to catch the 3 touchdowns that week. Because it could be anybody.
Grant, what's your take on the tight end situation in New England?
Yeah, we've seen this before. I was right. We saw Aaron Hernandez on the team. That's what Bennett's basically doing. He's the new Aaron Hernandez. Who knows how well he'll do this season, but he's going to be heavily involved in the offense. Gronk is Gronk every year. And the problem is that Edelman is in the lineup, so he takes a huge amount of targets. Hogan in there, who I was really high on him at the beginning of the season. He's an incredibly talented wide receiver for that system, and I think Brady's going to just fall in love with him throughout the course of the year. And so with all those guys in there, I don't know how often you can really play any of them. It's going to be like the Bill Belichick running carousel is every single year, but now it's just going to be which wide receiver is going to get anything. And the only one that's really going to get much usage on a week-to-week consistent basis is going to be Edelman, and my guess would be Gronk just from a touchdown perspective. But it's one of those things where I don't really want to play Patriots the rest of the season just because of this. But it's for real that these tight ends are going to be heavily involved and do a lot of things in certain weeks.
Yeah, so my take
course.
on this is it's easy to, because the precedent set by other teams is you don't want to take, the number 2 tight end because they're only on the field, 15 to 20 to some teams 30% of the time. But, I think with the Patriots, we're going to see a 70% snap rate throughout the season for these guys. And it's going to be mostly 2 tight end sets. So I think Bennett can be treated like a tight end 1, with the caveat that both guys brought up that the situation in New England, there's so many weapons, and then you got to include James White. You got to include Amendola. I mean, anytime they go 3 wide, Amendola's in the slot. Malcolm Mitchell, if they go 4 wide, they'll throw to him. When Dion Lewis comes back in week 7, he's going to be a big part of the offense. So there's definitely it's a muddled situation, and I don't mind going Brady naked in tournaments because I think, especially as these guys keep putting up numbers and their prices go up, there will be places where you can get better point per dollar production from a cheaper wide receiver than Edelman, or a cheaper tight end than where Martellis's price will eventually go. And so you can still get all the points from Brady without trying to pick and choose who they'll throw to. I think this is a situation, and we don't want to spend a ton of time here, but I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. And Bobby, I'll go to you first. But I think this is a situation where, with how difficult it is to predict where the targets will go on the Patriots, it's the sort of thing where you'll want to just figure out who's lower owned, because we can't really predict it, and say, okay, well, everybody's going to flock to Martellus Bennett this week. So who's the guy that people won't be on? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you're a one tournament, you're a single entry player. This is what you specialize in, and are you really going to put your one entry on? It really is a crapshoot. It's not a joke. They're that good. And so taking a shot maybe is worth it if you're playing multiple tournaments. It's actually more worth it for a guy like me who does play multiple entries than it might be for someone like I don't want to do it even with my 5 entries or 10 entries in a big tournament. I don't.
And on that note, I was down to Delaney Walker and Martellus Bennett for my 2 tight end, that I was deciding between this last weekend. But in that situation, it's a phenomenal tight end matchup, and Martellus Bennett was 3,700. I think it becomes a bit different as their prices begin to go up too, because 4,500 against the Bengals is different than 37 against Cleveland.
Delaney Walker was a better play than Martellus Bennett.
And they're just going to keep going up and up. Oh, yeah, and I agree. And obviously the touchdowns for Martellus made it look different. But so, Grant, what's your take on the situation in New England? Do we just kind of try to find the lower-priced guys, or do you think you can predict where the targets will go some weeks?
You just asked me. Yeah, you cut out for a second, so I wasn't sure if I heard my name. You can't predict where they're going to go week to week, except for Edelman and Gronk. And I think the play on a week-to-week basis is to play either Hogan or Bennett, and if you're playing many entries. But other than that, you go with Gronk and Edelman. Like, for you, I don't think you should ever really play Hogan or Bennett in a single entry. So that's my thoughts. Because Edelman, has a high usage rate in the offense. This is 1 week sample size. But last year, every single week, he had just a ton of targets every week.
And isn't it interesting that they sort of like made a point by doing that everybody else other than Gronk and Edelman and the old guys actually put up much bigger numbers? I think there's like a point, like there's just, this team just wants to like prove everything against. I mean, Belichick is a lunatic, and I love it. I love Brady naked for that reason, but guessing the wide receiver is impossible unless you have like against Pittsburgh situation. In that case, Edelman and Gronk become extremely good plays.
I hope there are some listeners who are new to DFS, so that when you say Belichick's a lunatic for that reason, I love Brady naked, would just have a totally different meaning than it would to DFS players. We're going to move on to the third one, and again, we're going to group a couple guys in here. And Bobby, I'm going to go to you first again. 2 cheap wide receivers who are still relatively cheap, and that is 2 guys who were everyone was talking about at least one of them last week. I thought both were going to be extremely popular. Only one was, but that is Sammy Coates and Cam Meredith. So Bobby, what is your take on these guys? Is their role something we can rely on moving forward? Are these guys, incredible values right now that we use even at high ownership, or do we say those were kind of outliers?
I'm sorry, what was I lost you for 1 second.
Sammy Coates,
okay.
Cam Meredith.
I 100% do not trust Sammy Coates. The more Pittsburgh gets going, I feel like it's not a New England situation. But if I'm playing anybody on that team, it's not usually going to be Sammy Coates. I'm very impressed by everybody who did. It was a good situation for him. They have so much talent everywhere. It's not somewhere I'm going to look going forward because it's really based on usually one big play and then sort of evens out with his other 3 or 4 mid-range catches. This week he happened to get in twice. Anybody on that team is a threat. Throwing him out there if you're playing a bunch of tournaments makes sense. Cameron Meredith is a legitimate, almost how do you not play him on DraftKings for 4,100 this week against Jacksonville? It doesn't make any sense. He actually is big, skilled. He's actually a little bit he's not exactly like Alshon. Alshon's a great receiver. He's just not himself right now. He's banged up. With everything going on that team, I really love what's happening for Meredith. I think Meredith is a great spot going forward. I actually feel like it's going to be, the only thing I hate is going to be his usage. I feel like, not his usage, his ownership percentage. It's going to be, through the roof, and it's going to be, as a tournament player, it's hard for me to not want to pivot a little bit,
Yeah, and I do wonder, there could be an element of people just not trusting the name. It's easier for people to trust usage at running back, where they're like, oh, this guy's going to get 20 carries, whereas they might think that these targets for Cam Meredith were an outlier. I guess it'll depend on how much people talk him up this week, but if everybody talks him up, he's obviously, like you said, he's going to be through the roof, but hopefully they won't. Grant, what is your take on Sammy Coates and Cameron Meredith?
So Sammy Coates, all you have to do is look at Marcus Wheaton last year and know that it's going to be a risky play. He had that one game where he put up 240 yards, and what did he do the rest of the season? Not too much. He's a big play guy. I think he's worth playing, but I'm going to play him when his ownership percentage is low. He has a huge upside, but this next week he's probably going to be really heavily owned. As for Meredith, if he's the only one that's healthy, which everyone else seems to be not healthy right now, he's going to get a bunch of targets. But if you check on Royals' health and you check on Jeffrey's health and you see how they're feeling this next week, it's cheaper than him. So I could see Royal go that he went off, and I could see Royal going off if he feels healthy. So it's something you got to check on.
Can I jump in here for a second? Because
I don't know enough about Meredith.
I think that it's just it's a very different type of situation for Eddie Royal to get his 3 scores or his 2, whatever he has in his big games. It's more fluky plays. It's third options. He's not the number 1 target normally. He's not that type of a receiver anymore. Meredith is actually a guy going forward who could become that type of receiver, and he's a different type. He's big. He's a guy you're going to look for in the red zone consistently as a number 1 or 2 option rather than your third option who bails you out when you have a quarterback who's actually able to think on his feet like Hoyer is. But I still like Meredith going forward as the other receiver in Chicago. I think he's well surpassed anyone else next to Jeffrey.
All right, so my take is going to be a little bit different from both of you on both these. Long term, I think both guys are trends. I'm wondering if Sammy Coates, and I think we all probably need to dig into this a bit more, but I'm wondering if Sammy Coates is Martavis Bryant. That's the role he's filling right now. He had 8 targets.
Blasphemy.
He had 8 targets 2 weeks ago. He had 11 targets last week. Hey, by the way, so this is a story that probably no one cares about, and I'll try to keep it short for that reason. I was the first person in DFS history to play Martavis Bryant.
You are a genius.
The way I know that is because I was just an accident, but it was a Monday Night Football game. I was in first place in a qualifier on DraftKings, and Ray of Hope was the only entry that had a chance of catching me. But Ray had basically we had the same players, except he had like 1 extra guy. So I guess I was in second place. We had the same players. And so I was trying to pass him. And Martavis Bryant was activated his rookie year. It was like week 5 or whatever it was, activated for the first time, and it wasn't even announced till Monday morning that he was going to be activated. So maybe a few other people played him that day, but like literally nobody had a reason to pivot to Martavis Bryant. He was like 3K or something. So I left like 5K on the table to pivot to him in order to give myself a shot. and was actually in first place until like 3 minutes left in the game. That was the same that weekend. Ray and Corey beat me in the qualifier and won the Millionaire Maker. So,
Oh, that's disgusting.
good for them, bad for me.
Yeah,
but
too
no,
good for them. Too good for them.
I feel like Sammy Coates is like his usage right now. 8 targets, 11 targets the last couple of games. Like, I'm definitely going to keep an eye on it. And they're playing Miami, who's just so bad in the secondary. There's a strong chance that I will not mind going there at 4,700. So I'm not saying for sure, but I'm definitely going to be digging in because I think it's a trend. Cameron Meredith, I love Cameron Meredith. I feel sick about it because I talked multiple people on to Cameron Meredith this last weekend. People who I talked to Sunday morning who were concerned about Eddie Royal being active. I was like, no, still play Cameron Meredith. And then I didn't play him myself because for some reason I ended up with Woods. I actually liked Meredith more, but I had 900 left over and used it on Woods. So that was atrocious. But no, I love Cameron Meredith.
That's why Draft Tree beat me, by the way, in the Big Thursday tournament. Sorry.
Cameron Meredith?
Well, instead of playing Meredith, I decided to go for Woods. And then I switched up my defense, which worked out fine.
God, at least I'm not the only one who played Robert Woods.
Dude, I thought there was something there. But I want you to keep going, but I really want to make a point about the Pittsburgh. My brother knows DFS as what he's as good as anybody. He just doesn't dedicate himself to it. He knows the Pittsburgh Steelers better than anybody on the planet, I swear, or better than anybody I know. And I just want to make a point that Martavis Bryant is not the same as Wheaton. He's not the same as Coates. It's a very different story. Martavis Bryant is a phenomenal receiver and has amazing hands. Look at the number of drops these guys have had already. It's ridiculous, and that's how big their games are. But I credit that more to Pittsburgh's offense because that's why they can't look at Antonio also. And I actually think Antonio is more of the trend going forward because of this kind of stuff. Because Antonio's still putting up his numbers and he's doing fine. But he might have like a 400-yard, 5-touchdown game. This team plays bizarre. They're crazy. I just can't wait to play the Patriots.
I just think that the role that Coates has is the Martavis Bryant role, and he's going to keep getting fed 7 or 8 downfield targets, which is pretty valuable in tournaments in my mind. So, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Maybe that'll be my bold call at the end, something dealing with Sammy Coates. But yeah, real quick, and we've taken up too much time on this. We need to move on. But my only thing with Cameron Meredith is it is worth noting Jacksonville ranks 7th in DVOA against the pass, and they are tied with the Ravens for the second fewest yards allowed per pass attempt. They've given a lot of touchdowns, so their fantasy points against look really sexy. But Jacksonville's pass defense has actually been really good. A lot of that is Jalen Ramsey in the slot, which I think he'll erase Eddie Royal this week, which will filter targets to the outside. But just something to think about for people this week. But
don't you also think that's situational? Like, it's different because it's been games, mostly they're playing from behind, so the teams aren't throwing the ball against them. They also have one of the fewest passing numbers attempted against them.
Yeah, this is early week. We're just kind of touching on some early things. I don't want to dig too deep because we're, as we tend to be, behind time already. But no, DVOA accounts for matchup. It accounts for everything. DVOA is saying moving forward, how does this pass defense project to be? So, I think – having them projected as a top 10 pass defense takes a lot of those things into account. And I do think that this is a much better pass defense. It's the Seahawks scheme. It's the Falcons scheme that really limits wide receiver. Falcons traditionally limit wide receiver production in a big way. Last year, they were number 1 against wide receivers, fewest fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. And I think that there's something to be said just for the scheme filtering away from wide receivers. So, I'm not saying don't play Cam Meredith. I'm saying it's something to keep in mind this week. And then another pass defense. This is our 4th trend or trap. We'll try to move through this one quickly. Is the Ravens pass D that because Sharice Wright, I talked to my NFL Edge last week about people pay a lot of attention to highlight plays. If somebody gives up a huge touchdown, the Ravens get dusted by Corey Coleman for those touchdowns. People latch onto that, but then they don't look at the numbers. So the Ravens are top 10 in DVOA. They are second best in yards per pass attempt. And people still aren't giving them credit as a good pass defense as a whole because of Sharice Wright. So my take is that the Ravens' pass defense is pretty legit. I've been avoiding them lately. And I think that their talent overall, especially Eric Weddle being at the back end, is enough to make up for Sharice Wright on the outside. So since they're playing the Giants this week, that is worth talking about. So Grant, real quick, your thoughts on the Ravens pass D. Is it a trend or is it a trap? Is this something that is just fluky and the Ravens are going to start getting burned like they were last year?
They were injured last year and they picked up more people. This is a trend. Don't need to say anything more. They're a good defense.
Bobby, let's hear you disagree.
In a million years, I would have thought Grant took that stance, and I totally agree. Sorry, I never would have thought he. I've watched everything. I've talked to a lot of people I know about football a lot more than I do, and the Ravens are legitimate. Like, this is not just their defense. It's just them as a team. There's something. They're weird, and I don't know how they win games. But their defense is a huge part of it. I like their secondary. I actually think it's better than any of the numbers can actually prove because it's so situational in football. I think it's a trend going forward.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on that. And that's probably a hot take for if you talk to a lot of sharps. But I think that by week – I mean, it's like last year by this time if you said the Jaguars had a good run defense, everybody was going to argue with you. I got an email last year around this time of year from one of the Roto Grinders editors telling me there was a typo in my article because I typed that the Jaguars were top 3 in yards allowed per carry. But it was true. And
of course.
Still and that was, they'd given up a 3-touchdown game to Doug Martin. And so everybody was picking on the Jaguars run D, but by week 16, 17, they were still top 3 or 4 or 5 in yards allowed per carry. And so, yeah, if you can adjust to these things for the public, it makes a big difference. So we're all on board with the Ravens pass D.
Can I add one thing about pass defense? Yeah, just about pass defense in general. I think it's important to note that just because you're a good pass defense, I'm not saying you're going to shut down number 1 receivers, legit number 1s. I'll take an Antonio Brown against the Ravens. I'll take a Julio Jones in a certain spot against the Ravens. Especially if it's in Atlanta. I'm not saying stay away from those guys. I'm saying stay away from the good receivers.
Yeah, and you're just basically saying there's not going to be many 300-yard passing games. There's not going to be. It's going to be much more difficult to see a 100-yard, 2-touchdown game against a team like that.
I think it's much more. I think it's more likely to see one guy have a 300-yard, 2-touchdown game than it is to see an average guy have a 100-yard, 2-touchdown game against them. That's what I'm saying about their. I'm saying that it can be exploited by the best receivers in the NFL, and it might be a fluky game. So I'm not saying stay away from them. I'm saying stay away from anybody who's below Hopkins against them.
All right, so our last one we're going to look at is the Packers run D, which is ridiculously allowing 2 yards per carry 4 games into the season. They're allowing under 43 rushing yards per game. Obviously, the easy thing to say is that the Packers are way ahead, and so teams have to pass. But really, they haven't been way ahead most games this year. So this is a bad run defense last year. They basically added Blake Martinez in the draft at inside linebacker, and that's about it. So, Bobby, trend or trap, the Packers run D, is it legit or is this just fluky?
Situational, but legit. I watched the Packers play the first week, and I was thinking, oh my God, this is a much better defense than I was expecting. They might go to the Super Bowl. I'm a little disappointed in their offense so far, but that'll come around. That's no problem. But the defense, it's absolutely legit. The run D is awesome. I'm not saying there won't be spots where you might find a good spot against them, but it would probably have to be a good pass catching back. In general, I think it's an awesome run D. I would probably stay away from them, which is really weird. I'll still attack them through the air, but I won't go with the running backs against them very often.
All right, Grant, what's your thought on the Packers run D?
They're middle of the pack. There you go, Bobby. I disagreed. Look at who they played. Giants, Detroit, Minnesota, Jacksonville. Minnesota without AP. They haven't played anyone. They're better than they were last year, but they're not as good as their numbers up here. They'll be middle of the pack by the end of the season, and
Did you say Minnesota?
We'll see how wrong I am about that.
The best team in football?
Yeah, the best running team in football. No, they're not the best running team.
I'm just kidding with you. They're not even the best team in football. They're the third best team in football.
They're
I think I'm kind of in between you. I mean, I guess, Bobby, you didn't necessarily say they're the number one run defense, but yeah, I mean, I think they're middle of the pack, but like high middle. Like I think they're probably a top 10 run defense. I have a lot of respect for Dom Capers as a defensive coordinator. As one reason I got off Odell Beckham by the end of the week was even without Sam Shields and even with Demarius Randall actually being a scratch, just with 2 weeks to prepare, I figured Dom Capers could figure out how to take OBJ out of the game, and he had 5 catches on 12 targets, something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
you were
Dom
so
Capers
smart for that. I wish you would have told me that, by the way. Saved me a lot of money.
Were you high? Well, if you and I had talked more, I would have talked you
It
on a
wasn't
lot of
that I
bad
was-
plays too.
I was high on the situation. I thought it could be a shootout kind of a game, and it didn't end up that way. But I thought if it did turn into that kind of a game, so I had him paired with Nelson a lot. I thought people were going to be sleeping on both of them, and I thought it was a great spot to go contrary. So there was my game theory flaw for the week.
Yeah,
I won with my chalk, and my game theory flaw wasn't a terrible play. It just wasn't.
Oh no, not at all.
It wasn't
But
the right play.
yeah, I mean, I have a lot of respect for Dom Capers, and I think he can keep this up with the run defense, and especially, it might be something to exploit down the road when they face a really good running back and nobody's on him. But for now, I'm definitely leaning more toward them being good than them being bad. I think we're all in agreement that they're not a bad run defense, and they're either pretty good or really good. So now we're going to move on to Love at First Sight and kind of hit on the main game that stands out to each of us at the start of the week. So, Grant, I want to throw it over to you first. Give us a Love at First Sight story and the game that you're looking at to start the week.
So I had to kind of figure out who to talk about for my Love at First Sight. So I just went with the one you mentioned. I went to a beer festival about 2 weeks ago, and of course I drank beer, if you couldn't tell. I went around and I ran into this wonderful little lady. She hit all my marks. She was over 6 feet tall, and she was a little bit very much weird. She bought me a bunch of beers, and we get to talking. Yeah, we should hang out later. And then she did one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen a woman do. Instead of giving me her phone number, she gave me her email address, and she wrote it out on a piece of paper instead of just giving it to me to put in my phone. Who does that anymore? I do not understand it at all. This in no way correlates to my play of the week. Just I can't believe that people still carry around pieces of paper, Sharpies.
You did break up when you actually said the words email address. So I want to clarify for listeners that she wrote down her email address, which I don't know if that says more, Grant, about the way she viewed you, like she didn't want you to have her phone number, or if she's just as strange as that to write down her email address on a piece of paper.
I'm not very good at telling when a girl's really into me or really not into me. So she very easily could have, because the email she gave me was, let's say her name's Stephanie, the original Stephanie at gmail.com. But she was been the one that offered it to me. But it's still,
Was
I
it like
don't
spelled out the
understand this at
original
all.
Stephanie, or actually Stephanie? Like just Stephanie. Like what was
No,
it?
the name is the original Stephanie at gmail.com. Her name's not Stephanie.
Her
So
name-
anyone
oh.
listening to this podcast, email her.
She's the first. She's the original, the first one ever. If she volunteered the email address, then she was into you. Did you lose the email address?
Email her? No, I'm not a
Or
crazy
did you lose
person.
it? Oh,
Did I use
so you
it?
didn't lose it.
No, I remember exactly what it is. It's on a piece of paper in my pocket still because I don't change my clothes as often as I should.
All right. So,
Oh,
what
man,
is your?
silly guy.
Even if since you can't tie it into this, what is your game of the week? What is your love at first sight?
Wait, can I just ask Grant one question though?
well-
Grant, wait. Before you go to that, do you write that down before you say it, or do you just actually remember that story just like off the top of your
Story?
head, or is it planned out? Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
they're
when
all
you
just
do it
off the
every
top of
week.
my head.
Oh my God, man,
I don't know.
that brain of yours, man.
I have
the
a
hell's
memory
going
like
on
a
up there?
fox.
What's going on up there? All right, get to your play.
I
of
don't
the
know
week.
what's
Sorry
going
about
on in
that.
my brain. All right, so we'll just talk about someone that looks like a tall 40-year-old woman, Ryan Tannehill and Ben Roethlisberger. This game's going to be a shootout. The over/under is 48, but it's going to be worse than that. I don't care who's. It's not in Pittsburgh, so you don't have to worry as much about a blowout. A spread this big, I get Miami's terrible, but bad as that, considering how Pittsburgh plays on the road a lot of times. Big Ben is going to go off no matter what. One thing to look at, Jesse James had a ridiculous amount of targets this week. He's finally coming into his own. He's finally filling, or whatever his name was, what he did last year. This game's going to be an absolute shootout, and I could easily see 60 points, as I talk about Pittsburgh every week's game. But you can play Coates, but he's going to be heavily owned. Brown is now 10K, which is going to mess with some people's heads because I haven't seen that happen, not in recent memory. And just going over the $9,900 mark is going to get people off them because 10K for one guy. Play Bell, he's going to get a ton of targets. Play, I don't know who to play at running back on the other side, but Pittsburgh gives up a ton of targets to running backs. Everything in this game is great. Play Landry because he's going to get 27 targets this week.
That's your bold call. I'm locking you into it. Grant, you still there?
I like it.
I am still there. I just stopped talking, which is not a normal thing for me.
Bobby, love at first sight.
Easy one.
And any takes on that game real quick too?
On Grant's game? Yeah, I feel like it's an obvious spot. It's a little too obvious. Like it's going to be over-owned. I'm going to get into game theory, which is really weird after what I was just talking about with Chalk. But I actually have a little bit more. I think.
Oh man, you got egg on your face.
It's a different week. And Grant, first of all, I'm the least chalky person ever. Every big tournament I've won, most of them have. I think I've had one player that was more than 10% drafted in. That's how I play. I'm very much that way.
Did you play Dexter McCluster this week? Because I did.
No. I'm just saying that this is how I play. I've made 2 lineups already, and they are loaded with Carolina at New Orleans. That's my favorite game of the week by far. It's an awesome spot. If people are really off of Cam, that's going to be the dumbest thing they've ever done. I don't know if they will be, but I'm looking at it right now, and I have no idea how not to play Cam or Drew Brees at quarterback. I don't care about paying up this week because I feel like there is value out there. Cameron Meredith is going to be in a huge portion of my lineups. My favorite play of the week is probably Tavon Austin, and nobody is going to be on him. He's been actually super consistent, which is weird. His price, he's underpriced at $3,900 on DraftKings. He'll be in a huge portion of my lineups against a pretty weak Detroit secondary. I guess he's not really a number one because he plays out in the slot. They're running him. They're getting him 10 to 12 opportunities a game. Against that Detroit secondary, I think that's a good spot. They've been pretty good against number ones, but he's not really a true number one. So I love Tavon Austin individually, and I love every single part of the New Orleans Carolina game. There's pretty much not a play I don't like. I don't really want to take any running backs from from Carolina. I'm very into Cam being the running back. That's it.
So I do think both. I think both those games will be popular. I mean, I don't think that people are going to overlook. I think people, by the end of the week, people will be back on Cam, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, those are tough spots to pass up for sure.
What do you think about Tavon Austin?
I think the same thing I thought about Nelson Aguilar last week.
Really? Because he hasn't had a Nelson Aguilar type of week ever. Look at his targets.
Yeah, but
it's absurd.
He's not going to get you 20 to 30 points. I mean, that's my take. Okay. And that's what I want anybody on my team to be able to get.
I would be very surprised if he doesn't get 20 points this week. I really think it's a big week for him. It's going to be
But yeah, so my game is the Cincinnati at New England game. New England's defense has been substantially worse this year than they were last year. Logan Ryan has been getting burned nearly as much as any cornerback in football. Malcolm Butler has not been playing as well. And I think that the Patriots, as good as the Bengals defense is, I think the Patriots can put up points against the Bengals defense, which will then shift to the Bengals having to be aggressive. And I think that they can put up points against the Patriots offense. So I'm going to stick with the Angry Brady call that I made last week against Cleveland for my love at first sight. Definitely think that the game in New Orleans and Roethlisberger at Miami are better spots. But I think that Brady is in a good spot, and this game could get much higher scoring than people would anticipate at first glance, considering the Bengals have a good defense and the Patriots supposedly have a good defense. But yeah, I mean, I like all these spots, and obviously, you can go to a chalky game and find players that are being overlooked as well. I mean, for example, Brandon Cooks has had several down weeks, but we all know that he plays way better at the Superdome. We know that Panthers secondary is going to have a tough time with him. So those are the sorts of things to be willing to look to, as well as you can go to a chalky game and still find plays that other people just aren't going to be on as much. So yeah, we're going to move on to our last segment, which is Money Matters, and talk about some of the lower priced guys. And Bobby, I'm going to let you carry some of this, because in my mind, there's not a ton of value this weekend. And before we get to this, I was looking through things and thinking, one thing to think about is, one, as I was saying, I feel like you want 20 points from anybody on your roster. I mean, you don't just want your 3K guy to hit 3X. You want your 3K guy to have a shot at 20 points, like Cameron Meredith or Sammy Coates this last week. So I think that a lot of the value this week might be forced value. It'll be interesting to look through and see what we can find. But that's going to make it really difficult for people to fit in Antonio Brown and have a good roster, or fit in Cam Newton and have a good roster. So I do think that presents an opportunity to take Brown and Cam, because they're so much higher priced, and they'll either be contrarian, or if they're popular, they'll be popular paired with a lot of bad plays, unless value opens up later in the week. But it'll be interesting to run through this, and Bobby, maybe you can illuminate me on some of the value you're seeing. But we're going to start at quarterback, which is where there actually is some value, although the higher priced guys are super appealing. We have Tyrod Taylor is basically a lock for 18 points against San Francisco. He's 5,300. Brock Osweiler has been awful, but he's playing Indianapolis at home. Tannehill in catch-up mode. Andy Dalton against the Patriots. Alex Smith against Oakland. Brian Hoyer against Jacksonville. All of these guys are 5,800 or below. Dak Prescott is 5,900 against Green Bay. Bobby, anybody I overlooked on that list, and any interest in paying down at quarterback?
I love everybody you mentioned. I would be open
really
to it.
Don't pay down at quarterback much, right?
No, I do. I mean, I took Hoyer in a ton of tournaments this last week, and I generally think that's the right way to go. I just feel like there is still always value out there that I see, and yeah, it doesn't always hit. I said Aguilar, but then I switched it over to Thielen and Meredith mostly, and that was when I found out about Diggs and I was unsure about. I started reading more about the Bears. You find out that they're really trying to get these guys more involved. I think Meredith is still a great play. I think I watch the Rams. I'm a Rams fan now, sadly, because I'm an LA person.
Nice.
So I have watched them play every week, and they make a very, very concerted effort to get Tavon Austin the ball. The only reason he's not putting up huge numbers is because he's not getting in the end zone. I think that changes at Detroit. I think this game goes surprisingly high scoring. He's a perfect kind of threat to beat that defense. Like I said, they can stop number ones. He is an awesome play to me at 3,900. I really do expect 20 points from him. I don't think that's even anywhere near his ceiling this week. He had 10 targets last week. He had 3 carries. I mean, it's just about not getting in the end zone for him, which is why his numbers are consistent, but not as high as you'd want them to be.
All right. Grant, anybody else at quarterback that we overlooked on that list? I spat out, or do pretty much cover everybody?
I love Lynch and Taylor, but I'm going to say something dumb because I haven't done that in minutes. Case Keenum against Detroit. Detroit sucks. Detroit sucks. Detroit sucks. Case Keenum is a bad quarterback, but not terrible.
I love you, Grant. Wait, do you like Tavon Austin?
I do with Case Keenum.
Yeah, there you go.
He's one of these times he's gonna do a 2-yard dump off to Austin, and he's gonna go for 80 yards.
Yep.
Weekend.
You LA natives. All right. Yeah. Running back.
I'm a Seattle native.
Not anymore. Okay, LA residents. Running back, Grant. Grant, I want to throw.
You don't got me there. Sorry,
Grant. I want to throw this to you first. I legitimately don't see anyone. I mean, unless you're talking dart throws, where you're like, oh, this guy could have a big game. I legitimately don't see anybody under 5K that I like at running back. The cheapest I've run into is Carlos Hyde at 5,100. Do you see anybody under 5K that I'm missing that you think can actually get, has a legitimate shot at 20 points?
Blau, I think is his name. For the Jets, Blau. He's getting like 9-10 targets a weekend, and Arizona. Well, I think that's the Thursday or Monday game. Can't remember, but he's going to get 10 targets this game. And Arizona gives up more catches to the running back than anyone in the league, I think. And James White against Cincinnati. Brady's back in the offense. I think that this is going to be a lot closer game than people think, and he's probably going to get a bunch of targets. Yeah, it's a little bit of a dart throw. But, yeah, there's not really anyone besides maybe Coleman because they're going to throw the ball out of the backfield like they did this last week. And Blunt, if you want to be a crazy person like some people are, because that is New England. But, yeah, there's Jack nothing.
Yeah, and I guess you could also say Ryan Matthews. I mean, he got quote, all the touches this last week. It was just 11 carries. He had 5 catches as well. But Wendell Smallwood got, I believe, no touches on the game. And Ryan Matthews is 4,900 against Washington. So, I mean, that's another guy in that price range. But, yeah, not like the 3K or 4K thing that we would love to get at running back. Bobby, anybody you're seeing under 5K who can really be relied on for touches and a nice floor along with their ceiling?
Not relied on, absolutely not. But, yes, some great tournament plays. I think that Jalen Richard is becoming a thing. And, yeah, maybe I'm watching too much afternoon football being in California, but he's talented. They're getting him more and more involved. It's going to depend on Latavius Murray's health. Whoever is starting at running back for them if Latavius Murray's out is a good play. And in either one of them, him or Washington, yeah, they're a little bit of dart throws. But look at the targets. Jalen Richard had 7 targets last week. Washington had 6. Even if Murray comes back and he's starting, he's actually kind of an interesting play. These are way off the board tournament plays. Other than that, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't go for the mid-range to higher level running backs. It's just there's a lot of safety out there this week. Usually there's more value. And like I said, I do think there is value at wide receiver. And I tweeted at Grant and some other people I know that I really do think going middle of the road is a lot the way to go in these things. There's a lot of safe plays with huge upside, like Willie Snead this week, for example, at 6,400. You don't need to go broke and spend $10,000 on Antonio Brown.
Yeah, and those are the plays that tend to go overlooked, especially because people squeeze in the value plays in order to get an Antonio Brown. I mean, we've seen him at, north 33. of 35% ownership in tournaments and 70% ownership in cash games, to get you 20 to 25 points, which is 2.5 times salary. So if you're not getting in, if your value plays are just getting 9 points at, quote 3X so that you can fit in Antonio Brown for 25 points, that's not worth it. You got to find a value play that can get you 20 in order for that Antonio Brown play to actually be worth it. So I do think that, I
forgot one thing.
Yeah, go.
Duke Johnson. He's still getting 10 targets a week, and he's getting 5 catches on average a week almost. And he's 3,500. So for a $3,500 player, I think his floor is pretty safe for 10. Besides this week,
what's his touchdown upside?
A touchdown with 6 catches and 85 yards, which is 20.
I don't understand why you're talking about Duke Johnson, who literally was just completely forgotten about. It's Isaiah Crowell's job. He's not even a player anymore. He had 4 carries for 1 yard and 3 targets last week.
Yeah, and what do you have the 2 weeks before that?
Yeah, there's a reason. Watch what they're doing now. They've changed the way they're running things. It's
in one game against a game they were getting.
Nope, and he had a solid game against. He had back-to-back better efforts, and he's their running back right now.
Bobby just wanted to find something to disagree with Grant about.
No, I really believe in this. I watched them play.
Bobby, wide receiver. Who are you seeing under 5K that you really like?
I mentioned Tavon Austin, and I can't keep not mentioning him. I think he stands out to me, but it doesn't have to be him. I can actually see Brian Quick having a game. I really like attacking that Detroit secondary with 2-3 receivers, and I don't think that they have a true one. So I kind of just like everybody. But I also think that I think the one guy who's like one really crazy wild play that people are going to think makes no sense is Terrell Pryor. I don't think you can base a game on against New England on anything, and he still wasn't bad. They're definitely trying to get him involved. My guess is at Tennessee, who's pretty awful. This could be kind of one of those ugly games where Pryor ends up getting a ton of touches and he's going to be overlooked. He's over 5,000, he's 6,100, but under 5,000, it's really, to me, it's Meredith, it's Austin, and I really like the middle of the road guys. I'm not going to go crazy. There are other guys who I would take shots on in some tournaments, and yeah, as the week progresses, who's healthy and all that. But right now, all that stands out to me are the middle of the road guys who people are going to overlook, like Willie Snead.
I'd like to point out too, Robert Woods is 4,200 and playing San Francisco. He did get 6 targets last week. He did burn me and you on some lineups. So he's also, I mean, he's at least in consideration as far as if you're looking under 5K. He should get 8 targets against a poor San Francisco pass defense. So
and possibly, by the way, Golden Tate. I know that sounds nuts. He's 4,400 now. It's just worth thinking about.
I've heard crazier things.
All right, Grant. Anybody you're seeing in the
Cole
cheap
Beasley.
range?
Sorry,
Cole Beasley.
Yep. Cole Beasley. There's a lot of them. Cole Beasley. You said Woods already. Tyrell Williams even going up against Denver. I don't know if he's going to be working out of the slot and if Harris is going to be on blah, blah, blah. I'll look into that later. Eddie Royal. He's still getting 10 targets a game. So I don't know why you guys are so far off him. He's only 4K. Jeremy Curley for San Francisco is getting a ridiculous amount of targets every week, and he's only 4K, and no one still talks about him.
That's a great play. I forgot about him. That's a great play.
Yeah, I think Curley's a good call, and he'll face Nickel Roby Roby Coleman is his last name now in the slot, which is a good matchup, the best matchup on the Bills side of things. So
yeah, then Pierre Garçon, and probably one of the best plays of the week, I'm sure people will talk about later, is Brandon LaFell's getting targets every week now. And he's a terrible wide receiver, but he has touchdown upside. He has 8 red zone targets this season. He had a great game this last week. He's 3,200.
3,200, yeah, and against his old team. So that's definitely interesting as well.
It is a spot. They did target him. I mean, they were down a lot, so they were throwing a lot, but they're going to be down a lot this week too.
So
it's a good spot. That's
last spot.
Good call, Grant.
Last spot is tight end, where there's basically just insane value every week. But a couple of guys that maybe might go overlooked. Will Tye could be a quote post-hype sleeper because all the sharps were on him this last week, and then he crapped the bed. Charles Clay has been getting targets the last couple of games, and nobody plays Charles Clay. He'll be playing San Francisco. And then Kobe Fleener against Carolina, he's getting the looks. You just never know. Zach Miller, Zach Ertz. Again, I mean, there's just so many guys under 4K at tight end. But, Bobby, anybody at tight end that really stands out to you?
Kobe Fleener. Kobe Fleener will be in a ton of my lineups. It's a great spot. It's a great situation. Again, like I said, I'm pegged middle of the road. Other than that, I love Greg Olsen on the other side. Especially, I mean, if Cam's going to play, obviously. But if for some reason he doesn't, just look at how much they're targeted. He had 13 targets tonight, even that one that he didn't get in the end zone.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absurd or whatever. I mean, actually, he had more than that. I'm actually looking at last week's statistics. But anyway, I just love every part of that game, so I'm very focused on those 2 tight ends at the moment. Obviously, Delaney Walker's a great play. He's over 5,000. It's worth it just to think about what their upside is because Delaney Walker has 20-point upside, and it's very realistic. It's really hard to talk me in. All this value out there. Fleener, I see it. Dwayne Allen, I actually see it in a very sleeper way. He's a very sleeper play for me. Jesse James, I don't see that high of an upside. It's just – and Will Tye, it's hard for me to see him getting 20 points. But Dwayne Allen, absolutely, I could see it. That's becoming a thing.
Grant, you're on your side. Any tight ends?
Yes, Jesse James is a great play. He had 9 targets this week. He's a great red zone target. He's on Pittsburgh. He has upside. They'll just say he has upside. Antonio Gates, they're just trying to get him the touchdown record probably at this point because they're done for. Or Hunter Henry if Gates is out. Gary Barnage is still Gary Barnage. That's probably not under the radar. But my favorite plays this weekend is Tammy for Atlanta. They're going against Seattle. Sherman's obviously going to be all over Julio. They're not going to be able to run the ball. And Tammy has 7 red zone targets. No one's going to be on because he had 1 target this last week and didn't do much of anything. He only had like 1 target the week before, but for most of the season, for the first few weeks, he was doing very, very well. So I love Tammy. He's only 2,800.
I think his hip is a thing. I think he's injured.
I think your hip is a thing.
No, I just think I don't think he's right, man. I watch him. He doesn't look like he's running routes really. He looks like he's like hobbling around the field. How's he gonna get 20 fantasy points hobbling around the field?
I could get 20 fantasy points hobbling.
One last guy. He's not really quote value at tight end, but Jimmy Graham is 4,900 and playing Atlanta, who's really bad against the tight end, and people want to keep thinking Jimmy Graham's not a thing, and within a few weeks he's going to be 6,500. He's topped 100 yards in back-to-back games. So Jimmy Graham, coming off the bye, he'll be rested. His knee will feel good, so I like that play as well. Okay, have either of you guys figured out a bold call throughout the course of the show?
I guess I sort of went with mine. Okay, you go ahead.
I'm going to say Sammy Coates has 9 targets and 100 yards receiving.
Is that bold? It's a down play from this week.
Yeah, you were saying that Sammy Coates is not dependable, and you can't rely on him.
I don't think he's dependable, and that's a nice game. And if he doesn't
9 targets is a lot of targets.
And if he doesn't get the end zone, he has 16 fantasy points. And my guy is going to have more points. So I guess my bold call is that Tavon Austin will have more fantasy points than Sammy Coates.
All right, well, we'll just make this really easy, guys. Brandon LaFell will have more points than the other guys.
Okay. Is that fair? I think that's right.
But I think I get a little bit of a handicap because my guy's really cheap.
How about Brandon LaFell? Hey, how about we do point per dollar? Let's do point per dollar.
That makes it easy.
Point per dollar, I'm in.
Point per dollar, Brandon LaFell is going to get 57 points this week.
Yeah, we'll do point per dollar because that basically scales it perfectly to.
You guys are going to laugh hysterically when Tavon Austin scores 3 touchdowns this week. It's going to happen.
I'm gonna laugh tears of joy. That's not the same thing. I'll have him in my offense.
Bobby, I'll laugh tears of joy for you because
he might even throw for one.
He'll be 1% owned, and you'll have him.
He's 3,900. Look at his. Look at
I
his
can
production.
finish. I can finish in the top 2% in tournaments right behind you, and that'll be okay with me.
All right, love it.
Okay, Grant. Any final thoughts before we hop out of here?
If you ever want to live dangerously, after you do laundry, put Icy Hot in one of your pairs of boxers, and you don't know when in the week, but you're going to have a terrible day one time. It's such a thrill.
Not food related this week. I like the change up. You went contrarian.
I went food at the beginning of the show. I can't do it twice.
Bobby, any final thoughts?
Yeah, you can definitely do it twice, Grant. That's not my final thought. My final thought is there's a lot of awesome spots this week. It's going to be, to me, the highest scoring week so far by all the winners. There are some spots that I could see going completely crazy. I like your New England call. I think it's really important to think about that Carolina-New Orleans game. If you watch that Mike Evans was on the only receiver on the field in an important 3rd and 7 in the 4th quarter that got them in the field goal range.
Like 3 yards separated from any defensive players.
Yep, there's a real problem in that secondary, and that's a huge issue with Drew Brees in that dome. And also with Cam back, though, he's dominant enough, and Olsen's dominant enough, and Benjamin. There is so much in that game to love. I can't get enough of it. So I just want to say going forward, it's Monday, but that's the game I'm looking at this week, and I hope you are too.
Last thought about food, put chocolate chips in your Waffle Crisp cereal, and it's basically like chocolate chip waffles. I'm really hungry right now, guys.
In your Waffle Crisp cereal? I don't even know what that is.
I don't either.
It's cereal that's shaped like waffle and is crispy. I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory.
Well, thanks for hanging. Grant, thanks for hanging out. This is Bobby. Thanks for hanging out. Listeners, thanks for hanging out.
Good time as always.
If Grant does not have a heart attack by next Monday, we will all be back.
Diabetes will come sooner.
We'll see you on Twitter this week. We'll see you at the top of the leaderboards this weekend, and we'll see you back here next week. Till then, signing off.